Welcome to the International Cinema's showing of the Korean Movie Festival. The best way to understand this movie, I think, is to look at it as three movies combined in one. The core movie is a kind of a dark comedy centered on the idea of a funeral, but it looks at the humor that's involved in a funeral. We see this in our culture. I think people see it in every culture, that sometimes you laugh or else you cry. And the dark comedy that surrounds the funeral is really quite an interesting story in and of itself. But there are two other things that are going on. You can also look at the film as sort of an anthropological documentary of funeral. It stops from time to time in the film and shows actual Chinese characters for the name of the different segments of the funeral. I haven't counted them, there are about 20 of them, from the passing to the burial and all of the things you do in preparing the body and all of these things, having the geomancer come and prepare the site and all of the things that are part of a funeral. This is fairly accurate anthropology. The third movie is really a child's story telling the child about death and helping a child to understand the death of the grandmother. So those are the three kinds of stories that are going on all at once in the same movie. The core movie, the dark comedy, centers around a novelist whose mother dies. And characters in the story that are important are his wife and his daughter, but also his older brother's illegitimate daughter, who shows up and throws a wrench in the works. She's quite an interesting character. We also see the reporter. A reporter shows up who really admires the writer's work, and there's a hint that maybe this reporter is closer to the novelist than should be. Throughout the movie, it shows little segments of the anthropology of the burial and the death and how this is done. And this is quite accurate, and it's done in a very nice setting, an accurate setting of rural Korea. So if you want to see what rural Korea looks like, this movie is really excellent. And then the third part is where it flashes to, it's a funny looking set. If you don't realize what's happening, it's sort of jarring as far as the movie is concerned because it's not natural. There's always a tree with pink blossoms in bloom. And what this is, you soon realize, because there's this flute that plays in the background each time, is a flashback, not really a flashback, a cutaway to the book that the writer is writing to his daughter, so his daughter and other young people can understand what death is. And the idea is articulated that the grandmother, she gets old, gets smaller and smaller and smaller because she is giving her height and her wisdom and her life to the young girl, the granddaughter, who is growing and growing. So it's an interesting sort of concept of introducing this book in sort of cutaways, and they look different, and you'll catch on to them, and they almost always come in at a critical moment when some pressure is on the family or on the writer about being a hypocrite or not doing what he should have done for his mother, and they cut away and escape to this book that's being written. So the movie is really this dark comedy dealing with funeral, but it has a serious undertone too, and that is the idea of resolution. And at a funeral, the bad feelings, the poor behavior, the things that have gone wrong are somehow kind of resolved, and there's a kind of a forgiveness. And the person that symbolizes this is the illegitimate niece, the writer's niece, the granddaughter of the old lady that died. Her parents both died, and she was left to raise herself, and she goes a pretty rough route. And she's by far the most colorful character in the movie. And she comes in and out and does all sorts of things that are way out of line. And people yell at her and tell her she's wrong. But she brings about an interesting resolution to the movie toward the end. And she's quite a colorful character. So it's an enjoyable movie. 3 movies wrapped in one. I hope you enjoy Chukje Festival.